Hi, this is Chris Foran and Mark Hossel with Bytelion, and we want to welcome you to Innovating with Lean Product Design. First in what could be a series of webinars from Bytelion, talking about how to use elements of lean product design to innovate either a product, a service, or innovating within a company at the enterprise level. For the sake of today's agenda, we are going to pass things over in a moment to our host, Mark Hossel, who brings us a wealth of experience working here at Bytelion as our head of UX. And prior to Bytelion, he has experience working at both Google and Apple, working with approving and also the refining and optimization of mobile applications for some of the biggest, best companies in the world. So really excited to dive into this topic. Just a quick little background or a short commercial here as it relates to Bytelion. Bytelion is a custom software development company and mobile app company where we have a team of 30 really elite designers and developers working out of our Hunt Valley office. And we bring a spirit of entrepreneurship to the projects that we work on. We work at the enterprise level with a lot of brand names, as well as working with a lot of startups, bringing their concepts to life in the digital world. So very exciting, and very much want to make this an engaging webinar by encouraging users to submit questions during the session, which we will answer at the end of the session. We're slated for about an hour here. So without further ado, we will introduce the speaker, Mark, who's going to walk us through innovation with lean product design. Thanks.
Thank you for the introduction, Chris. My name is Mark Hossel, and I am the head of user experience at Bytelion and a product designer.
Prior to working at Bytelion, I spent time at Apple and Google, where I was fortunate enough to learn a lot about how people design great products and innovate. This is the basis of what we're going to be going over today. Covering a few topics: what is product design and innovation, then going into how, some typical ways of what's stopping you and how to move forward. So the first question that we're looking to answer here is, what is product design? Product design entails the entire experience of a product, and that goes in and includes the business requirements that make the product viable. So if you make something that's very pretty, but no one actually uses it, then that's not the best product design. All right, so another key aspect of product design is that it's holistic. It's going to contain all of these parts: user interface design, user experience design, user research, which is a part of user experience design, and that's what makes up product design. Graphic design at the bottom tends to be more so marketing focused, but that's also crucial to your product. All right, so what is innovation? Innovation and product design go hand in hand. And the meaning of innovation is a new idea, creative thoughts, new imaginations in form of device or method. Innovation is also viewed as the application of better solutions that meet new requirements, unarticulated needs, or existing market needs. So that being said, obviously I think one of the key parts of this definition are the needs, right? Unarticulated needs or existing market needs. And here we have one of our most famous product designers and innovators and inventors, Benjamin Franklin. And that leads us into our next slide. So this is all about needs. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and both product designers and innovators are looking to solve a problem and fill a need. And what's great about this diagram is that it's very helpful in creating a visual for you that makes it a little bit easier to think about the needs and problems of others. Some of you may have heard the term first world problem, which generally means that something is not all that much of a problem. Obviously, that would not be something that falls in the lower category of basic needs. It's probably something that is a little bit higher up, but it's a little bit fuzzy exactly what that would be. So, diving into some of the needs that all of us are common or are familiar with, based on Maslow's hierarchy there. This one is food. This is one of our basic needs. And as you can see, we've made several innovations and new products within this vertical. It's good to note that there are generally two types of innovations or new products. Ones that are based on similar technologies. Those would be iterative improvements like the plow to the tractor, and blue sky innovations, which are so new and fresh that they tend at times to appear as though they don't have any competition at all. But that is a common misconception. One of those competitors for a blue sky innovation is depicted in this slide. And at the same time, it's also an iterative innovation. We have the tractor here, which obviously is, going to be competing with, work animals such as horses or whatever those other animals are in the upper center picture. But at the same time, the tractor has an internal combustion engine, and that innovation was able to come about due to the internal combustion engine, which is a blue sky innovation at its time. So obviously, at the time when it came out, the internal combustion engine and horses basically were filling the same need, helping transport people and basically providing extra muscle in order to be able to do things. That's why an engine's power is typically measured in horsepower. So, as we look through some of these, you can see, obviously there's some innovations here. We have Stone Age weapons to iron and steel weapons. All the way up to the Winchester rifle, to some that might seem like a blue sky innovation, but that was iterative development based off of gunpowder, and some of the rockets that the Chinese were making. Then we jump to the atomic bomb, aircraft carriers, rail guns, and then there are things like satellite weaponry, which are kind of way out there. The railgun as well is also based off of an iterative innovation. We're able to see maglev technology that's used in railguns used at places like Disneyland for the maglev rail train that they have there. So then we jump into information and communication. This one is apparent enough. All the way from cave paintings to writing on papyrus to books to the printing press, telegraphs, and then we have the telephone, which is obviously an iterative innovation, all the way to more modern phones. And now we have Google, which is able to make it so that you are able to access any information that you want at the click of a button. Computers speak for themselves. Computers used to take up large amounts of space in order to be able to do simple computations. Then we had punch card computers, all the way to some of the first desktop computers. We're able to see a nice flow in the design of the outer structure of computers from 1998 to today. That's for Apple computers, and then that other one there is a tablet computer, which is more and more common. And then at the very, very end, we have a quantum computer, which is pretty much a blue sky technology. I am not sure exactly what technology was iterated upon to be able to come up with quantum computers. And that being the case, you could say that quantum computers are an innovation, but at the same time, it's not something that necessarily makes it easier for other people to innovate with, because in order to be able to innovate with that new technology, you need to be able to understand its capabilities, what it can and can't do. And a quantum computer is an example of a technology that is somewhat difficult to understand for the general public. All right, so currently, this side here is simply here because this is an innovative technology that exists now. And at a certain point in time, this would have been considered extremely futuristic. It is an augmented reality headset that utilizes custom software. And I think the point of this is that technology today moves incredibly fast, and knowing what technologies are out there and how they can be used is a key part of innovating. Like I said previously, new technology is not always an innovation, but how it is used and how it's applied to the needs of the customer is what's truly innovative. If you have a new technology that never gets applied, then that's not too innovative. So that being said, most of the new innovations and new products that we see today are going to involve some type of technology. And waterfall development is one of the methods for creating software that works with technology. The waterfall model is a breakdown of project activities into linear sequential phases, where each phase depends on the deliverables of the previous one and corresponds to a specialization of tasks. The approach is typical to areas of engineering, and it today is probably more often associated with hardware and very specific types of software. And the reason for that is because most people have moved on to Agile. The reason we have a picture of a barrel going over the edge here is because it's one of those things where the linear model that goes behind waterfall development can be very hard to pivot out of. So once you start going over the falls, it's hard to stop and turn around. So today, a lot of companies are implementing agile development or some sort of agile, an agile hybrid development. Agile software development compromises various approaches to software development under which requirements and solutions evolve through the collaborative effort of self-organizing cross-functional teams and the end user or the customer. So that being said, this process is much more suited to innovation because you're looking to learn from your customer, you're looking to learn from your end user, and you don't necessarily have a really concrete, written in stone goal that you're trying to accomplish. What you're saying is that we're going to learn from the people that we're trying to serve, and we're going to try and serve them the best that we can as we move forward. At the same time, though, what's difficult about Agile for lots of businesses is that it requires an investment in the process and a trust in the process without knowing exactly what outcome you are going to get. In waterfall development, you say, okay, this is what we're going to build, this is going to be our outcome, and we're going to build it. Agile development, you could start out thinking that you're going to build one thing, because obviously you're going to have a hypothesis or an assumption that you've made to start, but it could change and be very, very different. And that's kind of why most places run some sort of agile hybrid as opposed to just truly agile. Okay, so getting into how we innovate and design new products. So we have two methods here which are very similar, and I wanted to just bring this up because one of our famous innovators that we were looking at earlier, Benjamin Franklin, he did not have a design process. He had the scientific method, which he was implementing to design and create many of the inventions and things that he was responsible for that helped our society. So let's just start off and go through the design process. So the first part of this is that a hypothesis or assumption has to be made at some point in time, and it's perfectly fine to have a guess or a hypothesis or an assumption as long as you recognize it for that and look to validate it or fail it out. Both of these methods define a problem, have a hypothesis, and collect information, and look to make improvements based on an observation. So if you look on the right-hand side here, we're defining a problem, collecting information, brainstorming and analyzing, developing solutions, gathering feedback, and then improving. There is not really a stop to this, and this is part of why it works so well with agile development. One of the things that innovators need to do is they need to make sure that they're looking at a problem from all angles. What you see on the left-hand side here is a pen that works in 0G. So why would somebody need a pen that works in 0G? Why not just use a pencil? I am not an astronaut, but maybe there are issues with graphite dust, wood, eraser bits, and different things from the pencil that would cause issues in 0G. I chose this as an example because the 0G pen is often cited as a waste of money, but in reality it has its purpose. If you look at the problem from all angles, which you really could do if you were actually in space. The plague mask is a perfect example of people making assumptions and acting on them. During this time, it was assumed that by smelling death and disease around you that you would get sick. So doctors of the time would put flowers and herbs inside of that beak-type mask in order to keep them from smelling the foul odors, and they thought that this would keep them safe. It didn't necessarily do that. So, yep, just another example of somebody misdiagnosing the problem. And one of the reasons why that's so important is this is the biggest error. This is the biggest spot in the process where people make an error, is defining the problem. And it also makes it's the hardest part at which to turn around and start doing things right. So this is kind of the other end of the spectrum. This is an example of a company that managed to identify the problems of their users so thoroughly that they were able to create 3 distinct softwares that to somebody untrained would seem to do the exact same thing. In the upper left-hand corner, there's a software called Mudbox. In the bottom left-hand corner, there's one called Maya. And in the bottom right, that one is called 3ds Max. And each one of these programs is used for making 3D models and can be used for making 3D models of people. But there are distinct differences to how each of these is done and to what it is going to do best. And each of these products is wildly successful. So we're going to stick to this whole thing of defining needs and defining your problem, because it's a very, very large issue. So you take a look at this. Here are some basic needs that are covered by a mobile application. We have Acorn and Robinhood. Both are for investment. Both have to do with money. That is going to basically go along with, your basic needs. Makes you feel safe, secure to have money. You're able to get food, water, warmth. So moving on. Psychological needs. We have Twitch and Snap. These two applications are much more social. You can use them with your friends. It also helps you with your esteem, gives you a feeling of accomplishment. You get a bunch of followers on Twitch or Snapchat, people following you, liking your stories, all of that. So then we also have mixed needs. Humans are social creatures, so with these applications, we could potentially say that they're hitting on multiple needs. Some might argue that physical contact with other people is also a basic need. And in addition to psychological needs of some people, might also argue that finding love allows them to achieve their full potential and makes them more creative. So from top to bottom here, we have Tinder, Bumble, and Coffee Meets Bagel. And all of these are applications that are supposed to help you find your significant other. So the top of the pyramid in Maslow's hierarchy is self-fulfillment. So at the bottom of the screen here, we have a mobile application called Calm. And this obviously just is focused on attempting to help you achieve self-fulfillment, helps you to relax, be more in tune with your surroundings, lets you meditate. There are several things that it lets you do. And at the top we have games. So one of them is just Candy Crush, which is something that people enjoy a lot and kind of maybe helps them be creative in some ways. But then on the right hand side we have Minecraft, where people are able to build worlds. So those are two areas that might hit on self-fulfillment. They might not. You could also argue that the app Calm also hits on some of your physiological needs by putting you in a state that allows you to rest, be more calm, all of those things. So after you've defined your problem, you want to do research, and good research is an absolutely crucial part of this entire process. Here what we're able to see Jane Goodall, and she is the world's foremost expert on primates. She is the absolute best at what she does. And I would say to you that if you are looking to innovate, then you need to either become the Jane Goodall of what it is that you do and try and be the absolute best and know the most about it, or you need to find somebody that does so that you can utilize their expertise. All right, so this process tends to be a little muddled for innovators and product designers at first, but in truth it really needs to be this way. And it is this way even if you might not see it. People will often say that they had some sort of insight just based off of normal observations, not necessarily taking into account that those normal observations are in fact observations and them gathering data. So once you have those observations and those insights, then you want to move forward with action. So the data and the observations from just your basic day-to-day observations that provide you that initial insight aren't enough. What you want to do is you want to go back around and you want to gather more data so that you can have more and better insights and then take action again. And this is something that we're able to see in the design process, in the scientific method, in how we go about basically anything that we want to improve upon iteratively. So now we're into our action section. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to iterate. You want to brainstorm, analyze, and develop solutions and gather feedback. And if you are going to fail, then you want to fail small. In addition, when talking about high-level concepts and ideas with a group of people or with anybody, without something concrete to look at, it usually leads to misunderstandings and misconceptions. Even with something as simple as one of these drawings, it makes it much easier to understand what somebody is talking about and get real valuable feedback from them. Whereas if we were talking about a mobile application, and you can see right in the middle of the screen here it says book session, and we didn't have anything to look at, and I was telling you that the point of this software is to be able to book a session for whatever vertical it might be. We could definitely run into several miscommunications about that very, very easily. But just this simple drawing makes it a lot easier to understand where both of us are coming from. Okay, so today software prototypes are easier to put together than ever. If you have an idea, there is no excuse to get out and start playing with one of these prototyping softwares, which will enable you to get feedback and validate your assumptions. The one shown here is Sketch, and you can get it for free for a month. I think it's $100 per year, which is very, very reasonable, but there's several others out there now, such as Figma, Envision, Adobe Experience Design, Framer, and I think there's about 10 others that are fairly decent. So you want to use your prototype and get it into the hands of observers. You don't want to just have a prototype to show to people or to show to investors. It can be useful for that, but you want to get feedback from your users. And as you do this, what you are trying to do is you are trying to find more ways to prove yourself wrong than right. This is tough because it's kind of like, I have this great idea and now I'm going to try and tell myself that I'm wrong. But this is what the best product designers and innovators and inventors do. If you are right, you will definitely know that you are right. Your users will tell you that you are right. Even if you're trying to prove yourself wrong. But if you're trying to prove yourself right, you will never ever know that you are wrong. So, and the whole point of this, if you have iterated on a prototype and have listened to your users, then not only have the chances of you creating a viable product gone up tenfold, but you have also done a ton to reduce the risk that you are or will be willing to take to build your product. Because building technology costs money, it's very much so like gambling. You have to play to win, and unless you can throw dice however you please, like Mr. Data here in the photo, you will have to follow this process just like the rest of us humans. So another thing that's very important is that the human brain has more connections for the eye than any other sense. And this is by a very significant amount. I don't remember the exact number, so I don't want to throw it out. But humans like things that are aesthetically pleasing. And if you make your product beautiful, then it will go a long way for your product. It may not help with end conversion in getting users to do exactly what you want them to do, but when people first pick up your product, they will certainly hold on to it for longer and give it more of a chance than something that is not pretty. For this reason, Apple has put a ton of effort into the aesthetics of their products. You can see this now in how their design guidelines for software have changed over time as well. They are much less focused today on functionality and interaction than they were 5 to 10 years ago based on their design guidelines, which is just an interesting note to make. So what is stopping you from innovation? These are some of the common things that people run into and cite as why they are not moving forward with innovating. So there's fear of making a mistake, cognitive biases, it's trying to not go out there and make that risk. They want it to be a certain thing. Financial is a big one. Obviously all of this stuff costs money, and if you don't know exactly how much it's going to cost, it can be quite intimidating. Lots of organizations have too many checks and balances in place to be able to take a risk that hasn't necessarily been assessed, or they just are a lack of ideas. So a few questions. Everybody wants to think outside of the box, and everybody wants to think of themselves as creative, but the truth is that very few people are, and even those people that we do think of as being creative follow a strict process when they are creating, in addition to setting up their environment for creativity and their process. If you take a moment and think about the most creative professional you know, they will have a strict process, and there will also be limitations on what they can do. They need to bind themselves so that they can really go about creating and optimizing what it is that they want to build or create. It should also be noted that people tend to have some of the greatest ideas for products that are closest to those products and work with them. So without a structure or environment in place that works for these people, you will likely never hear their ideas, and they could have very good ones. So some of the things to think about, do these people have time, resources, incentive, and autonomy? And does your company have a process for innovation that has actually worked? And another thing is, does the size of the budget match the size of the problem that you're attempting to solve? So no slide deck would be complete without a few stats, and I found some of these interesting. So only 1 in 4 companies are confident that they have the defined skills and activities needed to be innovative. 50% of organizations do not believe their leaders fully display the vision and passion needed to make innovation happen. And despite the pace of technology, only 37% of companies say their organization has made no or minimal changes to innovation, which basically means that they have been trying to innovate or doing the same things for a very, very long period of time, even though things are constantly changing around them. In addition, 61% of organizations say they are more likely to achieve success if they outsource innovation, which is also extremely interesting. I think it just speaks to how difficult this can be if you have established processes and things in place at your innovation. I think it's also important to note, and I was not able to find any stats on this, but it's also important to note that larger investments do not always equal a larger performance or a larger profit. So, how do you get back on the right track to innovation? So there are a lot of things to consider, and here are some of them. What new technologies and business models work with your business? You want to make sure that you're designing around your customer, whether it's an internal or external customer. You can design or create new products internally or innovate internally, but you still need to be thinking about the customer, who is going to be using that software. Align and promote innovation within your company's core purpose and culture. You also want to make sure that you're utilizing innovative frameworks that enable you to move more quickly, such as Agile. Being Agile or having some sort of Agile hybrid in place will definitely help with that. If you have a really solid network, then create a network of ideas and collaborators inside and outside of your organization. Another thing that is absolutely crucial is communicating with technical people to understand the cost of your solutions and understanding the problem, in addition to how much people are willing to pay to be able to solve that problem. That is definitely a part of understanding the problem. Another thing that's important to define is how much risk you're willing to take to build out the solution. And then deciding how to best test that solution that you have decided to build out. After that, one of the last and most important things that you can do is you can create a roadmap or a backlog based on feedback from users and data. This doesn't necessarily go... This does go along with Agile. Even though you're planning far ahead, the idea behind a roadmap and a backlog is that you can take things from the backlog. The backlog is all of your ideas, and then you can take things from the backlog and put them into sprints that you are working on. So here are some common ways organizations innovate. To innovate, you can create a new business model and improve customer experience, or you can change how you bring about a product or service to the market, or you can create new or more efficient processes. But these methods that we are showing here tend to also be a little bit more on the more traditional side and are not necessarily what you might call lean. This is why if you go down the right-hand column, you'll see names like Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Tesla, etc. So what about a single person or a small company? You don't necessarily have the resources that these companies do, so some of these options might not be extremely helpful. So one of the most cost-effective solutions that Bytelion has implemented with several companies ranging from startups to enterprise clients is the design sprint. Design sprints originally started out as week-long intensive sessions based on specific methodologies around gathering information and quickly making decisions. At the end of a design sprint, you have a prototype of what you are trying to build that helps you answer questions about the problem your users are facing. At Bytelion, we customize design sprints around the needs of the client and help them find these answers. So if you look at this, the current design sprint is broken down and is over 4 days, and you can potentially modify this if you need to make it shorter depending on the availability of the different stakeholders and subject matter experts. But on Monday, you're defining your challenges and you're producing a ton of solutions. And then on Tuesday, you're voting on which ones are best and defining a prototype with a storyboard. So how does this person go through this process? And how does our solution basically address their problem step by step? On Wednesday, you build up that prototype and you set up all your testing, and then on Thursday, you test it with all of your users and you get feedback from them, and then you're able to assess that feedback. And that is how a design sprint works, and it is extremely useful in being able to move forward and design and innovate on products. It also is much less expensive and much more cost effective than several of the other methods that we were taking a look at earlier. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to go ahead and answer those questions now. And thank you very much.
Great job, Mark. I really appreciate that content. I'm going to share a couple questions that came in during the session here. Anyone else has questions, feel free to submit them. The first question here is from Matt from Towson, who says, I have a startup and we are working towards a pretty complex technology build. Our fear is that we will not be able to build and launch our product in time before a potential competitor does. Do you have any recommendations for the best way to get started or to deal with this situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the common pitfalls that I have seen several companies fall into is wanting to create an application or a piece of software that has far too many features and does far too many things. I think what I would do is I would try to, go back to the features that you have, the priorities that are there, and reassess which ones are the ones that are absolutely crucial to your clients, to your target demographic, to the users. At that point in time, I would, focus on that, build it out, and then release it so that you could start getting feedback and start capturing a part of that market. The feedback that you're able to get from those people is going to be extremely beneficial. And, if you start communicating with them and let them know that you're working on addressing their problems as well, then they're going to let other people within that target demographic know about the solution that you're providing as well.
Excellent. Moving on, next question is coming from Bobby in Sykesville.
Okay.
Bobby's asking, my company says it wants to innovate and we're constantly talking about innovating to stay relevant, but we do not have a formal approach to innovation. How would you recommend we make this part of our everyday business?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think obviously for a small company, one of the first things that comes up is, how much money is it going to cost us to innovate? So, if you're able to come up with a budget in terms of, the money that people are able to use, how much time they're able to spend on it, right? At that point in time, once you identify what those resources are and how much you're willing to invest from that standpoint in innovation, then you can start to decide what the best way for your company is to innovate based on, some of the different ways that we had in a previous slide on how to innovate. If we go back to that, we can see quite a few here. We have internal R&D. For a small company, acquisition is going to be out of the question. You could potentially have a large network, so you could make a strategic alliance. Those have worked out very, very well. Small companies have great cultures. So you can bring in some really good talent there. I think that once you answer some of those questions, you can kind of decide how you want to move forward.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is a question from another Mark. This is actually Mark in Boston. He says, hi, Mark. We have an innovation that we have decided to move forward with, and people are talking about creating a mobile application. I feel like this is simply a buzzword, and we don't know whether or not we really need a mobile app or not. How do you determine whether how do you determine whether a mobile app is the right path to pursue or not?
Yeah, absolutely. So depending on what the innovation is, I understand your question. It is a little bit hard to answer without knowing a little bit more. But what I would say is that in general, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to reach back out to your audience, to your target demographic, and you're going to want to talk to them. So let's take an example such as, okay, maybe you wanted to innovate in an area such as, you have a large company and you wanted to increase employee retention or something along those lines, right? That might be a situation where, a mobile app could definitely help with that, right? Because it lets people be connected all the time. You can use it to help build culture. You can have social elements there. You can also, potentially implement ways to, give kudos to people that are doing a really good job, let them be recognized within the company in a way that, doesn't happen a lot, right? At the same time, in order for that to actually be useful, a company would also have to change their overall process and would have to implement a lot of new processes as well. So unfortunately, there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer for that question, but definitely talking to your users, and then you can find out more. And I'd be happy to chat with you more about this later if you'd like.
Excellent. And just for those people listening, we are going to publish this webinar, making the recording available online, but you're also able to email Mark directly with questions, mark@bytelion.com. We do have one last question, and actually I'm going to use perfect kind of wrap up to this
Mark
conversation.
With a C.
I'm sorry,
as well.
Mark with a C @bytelion.com. Last question is, again, the perfect wrap up for this conversation from Ashley in Baltimore. Great topic and content, guys. Do you recommend any resources to dig deeper into this approach, whether they be online courses or books?
Of course, there's a ton of great content out there from people that have gone through this beforehand and either failed or succeeded. And I definitely suggest reading as much as you can before diving in. One of my favorites is Sprint by Jake Knapp. That's the first book I would suggest. It goes into how to run a design sprint, but it also covers a lot of topics and best practices for how you can efficiently think about these things and how you can come to conclusions within a group about concepts that might seem a little bit fuzzy at first. There is also a book called Hooked, which is great. That focuses on designing habit-forming products. Really, really interesting take there. The Lean Product Playbook is also good. Let's see, I might be mixing that up. Okay, so that one is good, but there's also another one that is one of my favorites, and that's by Eric Ries, and that one goes into how to build out and test an MVP, how to validate your idea, and it also goes into understanding when it's time to pivot. At what point in time do you toss in the gloves and say, okay, we kind of made a mistake here, and our assumption wasn't correct, and if we want to continue down this path, then we're going to have to figure something else out. And that one is called the Lean.
The book's called The Lean Startup, and actually that's a good segue.
Lean Startup. There you go.
As we wrap up here, and coming at you from Bytelion, we actually follow the Lean Startup methodology here very closely. And for those people who might be interested in this book and interested in another resource, we will actually send you a free copy of the Lean Startup audio book in exchange for having a brief, quick conversation with us. We'll post a link to a page where you can simply enter in your information. We can talk a little bit about what you're working on, and we'll send you a free copy of the Lean Startup on us. So kind of a cool little segue there. We live it. It's kind of the Bible here at Bytelion. And whether you're a startup or an enterprise organization, as you'll find in this book, it's all about taking that lean approach to building things like we talked about here today. So I'd like to thank Mark for the awesome insights here today. Again, feel free to email Mark, M-A-R-C, at bytelion.com with follow-up questions, and we'll be emailing out the link to the book offer. And lastly, hope everyone stays safe and healthy out there, and keep listening to webinars, and we'll all be in great health. So have a great day.
Sounds
Take care.
good. Thank you very much.